First of all, congrats on your little bump.
Congrats on your little bump.
What about my bump?
Did you guys love wearing those kind of clothes that you...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And working in digital.
Everyone wants to talk about the clothes, but I wonder if they would ask the men about the clothes.
I would.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Behavioral Arts. My name is Spidey, and I use my degree in sociology and psychology, my certifications in criminal interrogation and body language analysis, and over 10 years' experience as an award-winning mentalist to teach people behavioral analysis and practical psychology on stages and television shows all over the world. Blake Lively has certainly been a major topic of conversation online and on social media for the last couple of weeks. And not just for one thing, it seems to be a mix of things. It started with rumors that there was some tension on the set of her new movie, It Ends With Us, between her and her co-star, Justin Baldoni. Then, on the press tour to promote the movie, a lot of viewers were talking about how Justin Baldoni seems to be taking the subject matter very seriously, whereas Blake Lively is taking it a little too casually and a little too lightly. But then there's the big one. In the midst of all this, an independent interviewer by the name of Kjersti Flaa released an interview from 2016 where she was talking to Blake Lively, and we see some of the strangest behaviors imaginable. In this interview, she's talking to both Blake and Parker Posey about their new movie, Cafe Society. And throughout the interview, Blake and Parker are talking to Kjersti in a way that people online are describing as a Mean Girls vibe. But what do their body language, facial expressions, and word choice reveal? Is this behavior actually ill-intended, or is it just an awkward moment that played off that way? Let's dive in.
First of all, congrats on your little bump.
Congrats on your little bump.
What about my bump?
You've got two nice ones.
And they are kind of bumps, aren't they?
No, not bumps. The lovely lady lumps. Check it out.
Thank you, thank you.
Are
you
you
like the
gonna-
movie? Are you a Woody Allen fan?
I love most of his movies, and this one was so, visually amazing.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
Did you guys love wearing those kind of clothes that you...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And working in digital.
Everyone wants to talk about the clothes, but I wonder if they would ask the men about the clothes.
I would.
I love Jesse's
He has some
suits and
beautiful.
how
That's what I'm
he
saying. His wardrobe was beautiful.
Oh, I know.
Corey's
Everybody-
wardrobe
I
was
know.
gorgeous.
He's
Those
so
high-waisted pants.
He's so great.
I wish men
And
wore
sorry,
high-waisted pants
too.
like
I
that
know.
still.
Awkward, right? I feel like anyone watching this could feel the discomfort, and there's a lot going on behaviorally that indicates whether it's just awkwardness or actually malicious. By the way, not sure I have to clarify this, but just to be clear, the comment was about Blake Lively's pregnancy at the time, and the interviewer started by congratulating her on the pregnancy. And a lot of people are talking about the snapback, how the first awkward thing that happens is this compliment comes in and she just throws it back at her. But the first sign behaviorally of something going on here isn't what we see or hear, it's what's missing. So you'll notice Kjersti starts with, first of all, congrats on your little bump. And the first thing that normally we see when there's a congratulations for anything, almost as a reflex, is a thank you or an acknowledgement or a smile or something. So that's the first thing that's missing. She doesn't acknowledge the congratulations, she immediately comes back with something. And the reason I say come back is because that's exactly what this is. And there's a behavioral indication of that. When the compliment comes in, if you look at her face, there isn't even a moment of a soft acknowledgement or even a thank you non-verbally, like something kind. What we do see is her eyes go down, glaze over for a sec, and we see this quick shift in the eyes. And to understand what that means, imagine if it was exaggerated. Imagine if you said something to me, and instead of acknowledging it, I went to these shifts. This is very consistent with looking for something, looking for an answer. A place we very commonly see this behavior is with comedians or live entertainers on stage when somebody says something from the audience and they very quickly have to think of something to come back with. And we see that quick shift as they find something and hit them back. So what that suggests is that in this moment, when that compliment came in, her response to that immediately wasn't to acknowledge or to thank, but rather to think of something to snap back with. And that's what she came up with. That was the intention. Now, there are two possible reasons this type of thing might happen in an interview like this. The first is that she's trying to introduce some humor, some comedy into this moment, and it's really not working out. The second reason is that she's purposely trying to introduce conflict, that she's being confrontational. And there are some behavioral clues that are going to let us know which of those two is more likely. But before we talk about them, let me tell you guys about this week's sponsors. As you all know, I don't really do sponsored ads. The reason for that is for me to promote something, I really have to believe in it. Otherwise, it won't be genuine and you'll see right through it. However, this video sponsor is solving a huge problem that I don't think most people are even aware of. And I have some close friends who use this service and swear by it. So I'm very happy to work with this week's sponsor, Aura. It is a really important time to be talking about Aura because hackers may have already stolen the social security number of every American watching this video right now. Over the summer, it was revealed that there was a massive online breach and 2.9 billion records were stolen from National Public Data, which is a company that offers information to employers, private investigators, staffing agencies, and anyone doing background checks. They may have your information without you even knowing about it. These stolen records may include your full name, date of birth, address, phone number, social security number, and these hackers have reportedly released some of this information online for free. The reason this is important to me is because I have friends who have been victims of online identity theft, and it is not fun. It's extremely frustrating and costly. We're at a time in history where we've never been more vulnerable online than we are right now. Now, as a Canadian, I unfortunately cannot use Aura myself, but since I found out about their services and this big online breach, I told a few of my American friends they're using it and they're extremely impressed and satisfied with the security and safety that they're being provided. And it's not just about the breach. Aura will also check countless online data brokers for you and see if they're sharing your personal information and will remove you from all those lists. Aura will alert you if they find your phone number, email, or social security number on the dark web. They will let you know fast if someone's trying to use this information to gain access to your credit or bank accounts, and they will give you $5 million in identity theft insurance should the worst case scenario happen. They have a bunch of other features to keep you safe online as well, and this is all in just one app. Now here's the great news if you're worried that your personal data may have already leaked and you want to make sure that your identity is safe online. Head over to aura.com/behavioral arts, and I'll put that link in the description, and you will get a 2-week trial on Aura for free. And the reason this is great is because those 14 days that you're getting for free is enough time for Aura to check and let you know if your information was leaked or exposed as a result of one of these breaches. So make sure to protect your family and your identity online. Head over to the link in the description and try Aura for 2 weeks for free. Okay, back to Blake. So as the interviewer says, first of all, congrats on your little bump. And Blake has that quick shift and she comes back with congrats on your little bump. There are a couple of things we see already in that moment that suggest not just what's being put out, but how it's being taken. So look at the way her hand says, congrats on your little bump. And we see this jerky forward gesture with the hand, and then she comes back and we hear this audible slap down on her leg. So think about another situation where I might use something like that, right? Let's say we're hanging out and you're looking for the remote to the TV. And I say to you, oh, it's over there. As opposed to me going, it's over there. And you see this and this kind of audible slap, right? Already just this kind of gesture, this kind of jerky, towards her that we're seeing there, and this coming back and kind of like this slapping already indicates a little bit of impatience, a little bit of confrontation. So this isn't being delivered as a joke. We're not seeing this softness around it. And again, that lack of thank you so much and then trying to make humor means that she's going to this confrontational place almost immediately. What's also really interesting is Kjersti's reaction, the interviewer. So her experience as an interviewer kicks in at this point, because the reasonable thing in a normal interaction when you congratulate someone on something and they snap back at you would be either confusion, where you go, what was that? Where'd that come from? And we would even see it on the face, some squinting, some looking around like, what's going on? Or you might see the person snap back, right? Because that was completely uncalled for. So go, hey, what was that? What's going on? But as an interviewer, she just started the interview. She doesn't want to go down that path. So she kind of assumes the best case scenario and kind of laughs about it like it's a joke, even if she doesn't really get it. But what's great is we don't really see this kind of what the heck was that kind of thing. She just laughs it off and tries to move on from that. Here's another thing to keep in mind. I have quite a bit of experience with press tours like this, and Kjersti has confirmed this as well. But contrary to what a lot of people believe, they don't have 20 minutes there where they're sitting and chatting about life, where something could have been said to build this tension. That's not the way it works. Typically, they're in that same room and the person who's interviewing them alternates. So somebody comes in, they have their time, they leave, somebody else comes in. There's usually less than 2 minutes of like, hey, nice to meet you, I'm excited, you look great, whatever, boom, and they start. So there really wouldn't have been a lot of time for anything to happen. Kjersti confirmed this on her YouTube channel. She walked in, she sat down, we're rolling, boom, and this. So far, just after that first reply, this is playing out like, you know how sometimes you're in a group and somebody says like a really lame joke or a bad joke and you just kind of go, and you kind of look around. That's what that's playing out like so far. You'll notice that the signs of stress or discomfort aren't really showing on the interviewer yet. And she's kind of looking around and laughing to kind of just lighten the mood and let's keep moving. That said, Blake does something that indicates that in her head, there's already a conflict here. And it's the fact that Parker Posey makes a comment and all of a sudden that distraction gets all of Blake's attention. She completely turns her attention to Parker, who's trying to throw in a joke about her bump, which is her bum. And then Blake completely embraces this topic change. And now instead of talking about the movie or anything else, we're talking about this, her bumps. And she says, you have 2 nice ones, which has nothing to do with the conversation that they're here to talk about and is a little inappropriate. And then she quotes a Black Eyed Peas lyric when she says, no, not bumps, lovely lady lumps, check it out, which is what Fergie says in their song, My Hump. And what's important here is that she's completely embracing this opportunity to take the energy and the attention somewhere other than Kjersti, the interviewer. And this is something we very often see in moments of conflict or stress or when there's a certain topic that makes us nervous and we don't want to talk about it. We embrace any scapegoat. In fact, this is a psychological technique that we teach and use in interrogations and in interviews. And there are certain situations in which you can use this to know where someone's priorities are. So in an interview, let's say, for example, that I'm looking at a resume and the person has worked at both Walmart and Target. But for whatever reason, throughout the interview, I felt like there was some kind of tension at their job at Target. And I want to test that. So I might say something like, oh, I see here that you worked at both Walmart and Target for quite a bit. Tell me about that. So I put both together in the same question, and I want to see how much attention each one's going to get. So is this person going to answer that question by talking this much about Walmart and almost nothing about Target? Will they talk about both as one experience? Will they talk about both equally? You often get indications as to which one they're totally fine talking about and which one they're avoiding a little bit because they were given that choice. And there's all kinds of ways to use this in interrogation as well to see if a location or an item or a topic makes someone nervous and they'll take any opportunity to avoid talking about it. So here Blake is taking this opportunity to talk to Parker about anything, and then Parker brings the conversation back to the interviewer, to bring her back into the conversation. And yeah, you can argue that it's done in a bit of a catty way, in that way that she's looking at her going, so did you like the movie, dragging that E? So some people might feel a bit of cattiness in that.
Do you like the movie? Are you a Woody Allen fan?
But let's give her the benefit of the doubt for that moment and call it neutral. It's not, because she's bringing the conversation back, we'll give her a +1, and it's a little catty, we'll put -1, so that just kind of cancels each other out. So she asks her the question. And the interviewer says, I love most of his movies, this one was visually really stunning, and Cafe Society was set in the 1930s. It was about Hollywood in the 1930s. So she asks a question that I think is rather normal. She says, how did you guys like those costumes, those 1930 costumes? And as Parker is answering the question to interview the way you're supposed to interview, Blake jumps in and turns to Parker again, answers to Parker and says, I wonder if they would ask the men these questions. So again, first opportunity she gets here that, Parker's trying to bring the interviewer back in. It's shut down by Blake and she's almost judging the questions.
Did you guys love wearing those kind of clothes that you...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And working in
Everyone
digital.
wants to talk about the clothes, but I wonder if they would ask the men about the clothes.
I would.
Now, while she's saying that, you'll notice her left leg is over her right leg and it's just kind of swaying back and forth rapidly. And if this was the first time this was happening, I would say that this is very possibly a pacifier or an adapter. These are the terms that the research uses to denote gestures that are self-soothing, usually repetitive, often like a massage-like gesture, but often it can also just be kind of a jitter that allows us to just self-soothe, to bring down stress. But the issue is, we saw this previously as well. It happened earlier with the previous question. But the other thing is, this interview was confrontational almost from the get-go from Blake. The first comment, she snapped back right away, and we're seeing this leg thing. So it's hard to baseline something that's starting as a confrontation. I'm looking for things that stand out from the norm, but it started off as confrontational. So is her leg swinging back and forth something that's just part of her baseline, that if they were having a pleasant conversation, it just would have happened anyways? Or is it because of the conflict that was there from the beginning? It's hard to tell. Something that is changing behaviorally, however, is Kjersti, the interviewer. Because by this point, I think she's realized there's definitely some kind of tension here. Because she asked the question about the costumes, and Blake barely answers the question, and she goes, yeah, I wonder if they would ask the men that. And her entire attention is on Parker. She's completely ignoring the interviewer. But if we look at Kjersti, there are a few things that happen. First, on this one, she does push back. She goes, I would. So on this one, it's not like we're just trying to move on with positivity and let's not address the tension. She does bite back and go, yeah, I would ask the men this. There's a politeness to it, but she does push back a little. And while she's saying I would, you'll notice she also kind of looks over to Parker really quick. And this is something we do in situations like this where we're looking for someone to jump in here and help. And you're also trying to gauge, because it's a fragile moment. Because it's either about to turn me against them, or Parker, who kind of turned it back to me earlier, might sympathize with me and stay on my side. So she's kind of trying to gauge, where's Parker in all this? But Parker has turned her entire attention to Blake, and now they're in their own little world discussing something like the interviewer isn't even there. But when the camera cuts to her, we see a couple of things. First, earlier when that first joke happened, she kind of laughed with it, kind of giggled and tried to move on from it. Here, it's not laughter, it's not even a genuine smile. This is the epitome of what we call a social or polite smile. It's the opposite of what we call a Duchenne smile, which was coined by Guillaume Duchenne, who was the researcher who found the muscles that go into a genuine smile. A lot of stuff on the upper face. We're not seeing that there. It's just a very polite smile with this bit of a head tilt as she's looking over at them. And if we look at the hands down here, we are seeing very gentle pacifying. We don't see her for too long, but even in that moment, earlier she was talking with the hands like this, and there was one point in the beginning where they came together for a quick sec, but here they're together, and we're seeing her kind of pacify with those fingers. It's that massage-like self-soothing gesture with that head tilt.
Or
too.
the father with his tank top and bed.
It's so
Just
good.
it's just like
Did you
that.
catch
You could feel
the
it.
tablecloth on the light in the Italian restaurant when they eat spaghetti?
I didn't
and
notice that. No.
There's
So
so
I
much
feel like-
warmth of everything, you know.
Yeah, it's not just the women that have the clothes.
But
I feel like the women
Victoria-
get the conversation, but it's like
Yeah.
every detail with everybody.
But yeah,
It's so,
it was
so
amazing
beautiful.
to look at.
Steve's
And then to see
white
it,
suits.
yes.
And then you notice in LA, like everybody's in cream colors and all the men are wearing like white and cream. And then you get to New York and it's a little bit more browns and moodier. And Susie really told such a story.
Yeah, amazing.
Alongside Vittorio, because it is a lot brighter and sunnier in LA, and New York has just a steaminess to it.
And I think, the whole Hollywood glam, it's so glamorous and everything. Can you relate to the things they were saying about Hollywood? It's so easy to get seduced by the fame and the money and the glamour.
You see it all the time. That was one of my favorite things about the movie, were the subtle turns to their own transition into like the ego of showbiz that Kristen has in that scene with Steve Carell. And then with Bobby taking on the persona of a club owner, but still, like, these are things you do when you're an adult.
Yeah.
When you have to work, you have to, you play a part. You play at your life in a way that you find successful, or so it's a lot about choices. And then they carry this love, and it's just very. It's very grown up
It's neat to
and
see where
warm.
they came from, though, and see how authentic these people truly are and what good people they truly are, too.
Yeah.
Because it's what you would see from the outside of the cafe society. You could dismiss each of their characters, but
Right.
to see what a heart and soul each of them have.
Okay, what? Now it's turned into like a dialogue, and the interviewers, they're like, should I go get a coffee, a little lunch break? I'll come back, let me know when you're ready for your next question. It's super awkward. They're in their little bubble, and they're like purposely excluding her. And at this point, it's like Parker has just joined into this vibe. And this is why people are calling this Mean Girls, because even if at first we saw from Parker just a little bit of trying to include Kjersti, and there's little bursts of it here too, or like a little turn, it's almost like Blake is the cool girl here, And she's keeping Parker on this little let's pick on the interviewer, thing, this whole vibe. But let's talk about Kjersti, the interviewer, because on numerous occasions it cuts to her and we're seeing some behaviors that weren't necessarily there before. There are certain moments where even that polite or social smile has completely faded and it's just blank expression. We're seeing those adapters or pacifiers now have skyrocketed. Whereas earlier it was a subtle thing like this, now we're seeing the individual hands kind of rubbing back and forth like this. And I can't give you a better example of an adapter or a pacifier. We have someone here who's talking with her hands earlier. We saw a little bit of this, but now we're definitely seeing this back and forth massaging gesture, which is self-soothing. Another thing that's different for her is a very increased blink rate. So in the beginning, when she was actually able to be part of the conversation, she had a rather normal blink rate, which is, the research shows, anywhere between 14 to 21 blinks per minute. It varies from person to person. It was pretty normal for her. At this point, almost every time, not every single time, but almost every time it cuts to her, we see a very increased blink rate. Blink, 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 blink. And there's one particular one that we see in that moment where she tries to jump in and fails. So she's sitting there listening to them, and as an experienced interviewer, she's probably waiting for her in, like a way to get back in the conversation. And blink rate is often associated with stress, because the more we stress, the more the eyes dry out, and blinking a lot corrects that. So in that moment, we see that blink, blink, blink of stress as she tries to jump in. It doesn't work. Parker kind of acknowledges her for a second and then goes right back to talking to Blake, and they shut her out completely for another stretch.
I didn't notice that. No.
There's so much
like,
warmth of everything,
Yeah, it's not just the women that have the clothes.
But
I feel like the women get the conversation, but it's like every detail with everybody.
Yeah,
it's
it was
so
amazing
beautiful.
to look at.
And notice what happens the first time Blake actually addresses her in the conversation. She turns to her, she doesn't even directly address her. It's more of a comment that's meant as a hit on the initial question, because she turns to her and goes, it's not just the women who get the clothes. And then we see something quite particular on her face. We see this little squint with the eyebrows as the eyebrows come down, and then she turns back to Parker and says, I feel like it's the women who get the conversation, and then keeps on going.
Yeah, it's not just the women that have the clothes. I feel like the women get the conversation, but it's like...
First of all, it's a bit of a weird thing to say. I feel like it's only the women who get the conversation, because you're in a room where, because of the way it was arranged, you're here with a co-star who's a woman being interviewed by someone who's asking you a question. Every question in this interview is going to only be directed to women. We don't know what she would have asked the men. She might have asked them that question as well, or would have liked to, but she's interviewing you. So yeah, of course, all these questions you're getting are being asked to the women. Two women are being interviewed. But second, we have that squint as she's saying that. And very often in conversation, we see this squint if it's not curiosity, because again, we squint when we try to get a better look at something. So if something's confusing or gets our curiosity, when we're talking and we see this squint, it's very often when we're imparting wisdom. So, and it's not always malicious, right? It can be malicious. So think about someone saying something along the lines of, what are you doing? You're supposed to put the milk in first, or something like that, whatever, off the top of my head, where it's like critical. It can be that, but it can also just be someone saying some kind of instruction and saying, and then at the end, we typically tend to put the milk in first. And that squint is kind of like just trying to communicate, like, I'm explaining something. We often see in that context. But whatever the case, we're imparting something. So in this situation, because of the context, it feels critical. Not necessarily the gesture or the words, because if they're having a pleasant conversation and she's giving a long answer and they're connecting and she goes, I feel like the women get this question a lot, but I think it applies to both genders. There wouldn't have been any issues with that. It's the way that she's completely shut her out and only turns to her to go, it's not only the women who get the clothes. I feel like the women get the conversation, and goes right back to Parker. It's the context that makes that gesture a little more negative and critical than it would have been otherwise. Before we move on and look at the next part of this interview, I want to talk about something that's really, really important. So in my training with behavioral analysis and criminal interrogation, there's a very big focus on staying unbiased and objective in an analysis, because if you've already decided that someone's guilty before you go into an interrogation, your analysis is absolutely worthless. You're just looking for things to support that. That said, some people might look at this analysis and feel like I'm biased in a certain way because I'm pointing out a lot of negative things. But I really want to state this very important distinction. Unbiased does not mean that you can't have any strong opinions. Unbiased simply means that those opinions were not formed before the analysis. So I didn't come into this interview and say, oh, I do not like Blake Lively. Let me look at this video and find reasons to support that conclusion. Quite the contrary. I don't have much of a strong opinion on Blake Lively, but I'm a big fan of Ryan Reynolds as an actor and as a Canadian. And I like that chemistry that they have online. They kind of joke with each other. I've always thought that was funny. But outside of that, I don't really know that much about her. I haven't seen her in that many interviews. So I came into this interview saying, okay, let's see what the fuss is about. And behaviorally, I saw a lot of things that appear to be condescending, dismissive, confrontational, and that's what I'm offering as my analysis. These weren't concepts that I was looking for coming into the analysis. Do I think she's this big, horrible person? I don't know if she's a big, horrible person. I analyze behavior, not character. Behaviorally here, I am seeing things that are disrespectful and dismissive, and that's what I'm calling out. But at the end of the day, I really don't care if people watching this like Blake Lively, don't like Blake Lively. I have no biases towards her as a person, but in the analysis, yeah, it's not a great look. Okay, thanks for coming to my TED Talk about being unbiased. Let's talk about Parker Posey a really quick sec before we move on from this clip. In the beginning, it seemed like there was a little bit more playfulness with her and trying to throw the conversation back to the interviewer. At this point, it looks like she's bought into the, Blake is leading this dynamic and I'm just following. Because, yeah, there's a couple of quick glances, but again, when she gets that question about the glamour of Hollywood, she quickly answers it, but then turns her attention to Blake and goes right back to what they've set up here, this conversation.
Can you relate to the things they were saying about Hollywood? It's so easy to get seduced by the fame and the money and the glamour.
You see it all the time. That was one of my favorite things about the movie, were the subtle turns to their own transition into like the ego of showbiz that Kristen has in that scene with Steve Carell.
But it's progressive because it wasn't always like that. It's become that at this point. And I think that's why a lot of people are calling this the Mean Girls vibe. Because if you look at the Mean Girls story, individually they may not be mean, but when their leader is around, they all kind of give in to that dynamic and follow that lead of being a mean girl. And I think that's very much what's happening here.
What do you feel like is the biggest misconceptions about fame and Hollywood in general?
I think the idea that people think that they know you, I think because of the how intrusive media is these days, people care so much more about your personal life than they do your work, and if you aren't open with your personal life, then they just make it up for you and share it for you. So I think the biggest misconception I see often is people feeling like they know someone that they don't, because they know what the media has created of someone. And the disappointing thing is when you meet the people, they're always so much more awesome than they're portrayed to be. I mean, that's normally my experience. And even people that are portrayed to be really great people, they're just a lot more complicated and interesting and nuanced and caring and thoughtful. And that's always nice, to see that your idea of someone isn't always who they actually are.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, guys.
Take care.
Okay, so this part is going to be a lot more about word choice and statements. So the question is, what is the biggest misconception about fame and Hollywood? And I think the question is rather simple. She's asking, what is the biggest thing that people assume about the life of a Hollywood star or the fame of a Hollywood star that they're wrong about? I think, and I could be wrong about this, but I think that her answer might be just another little jab at that initial question about the pregnancy, because she's saying that people care about your personal life and not the work. So it might be a little jab in there of like, maybe she's almost even saying why that question set her off, that we're here to talk about the work, and it irritates me that people talk more about the personal life and they think they know you and they care more about that than the work. So it might be a callback to that. Then the answer kind of goes a different way than I thought it was going to go. And I wonder if it was the same for you, because she's saying that the media paints you a certain way and people think they know you. But then when you meet these celebrities, very often they're much better than the media portrays them. And there's this weird back and forth, because she says that the disappointing thing is that when you meet these people, they're more awesome than they were portrayed to be. But that doesn't make any sense. Why would that be disappointing? Why would it be disappointing that someone is more awesome than they were portrayed to be?
And the disappointing thing is when you meet the people, they're always so much more awesome than they're portrayed to be.
And I'm not even sure she knows where she's going with this. And somehow I think she's editing as she goes along, which explains this, than they were portrayed to be, because she realized that she said, it's disappointing that they're more awesome. That doesn't sound disappointing at all. And then the next sentence is the exact same thing. She says, even people who are portrayed to be great people are more complicated and interesting and nuanced and caring and thoughtful. So hold on now. Great people can't be those things? Because that's what she's saying, right? People who are portrayed as great turn out to be these things. So it's almost like if you simplify the statement, you're saying, I thought this person was going to be great, but turns out they're complicated and interesting and nuanced and caring and thoughtful. But all those things are great.
And even people that are portrayed to be really great people, they're just a lot more complicated and interesting and nuanced and caring and thoughtful.
So basically what you're saying is the media had it right. They are great. So it's kind of bizarre to me that she's going, you know, they're portrayed as this one thing, and it's really disappointing because you meet them and they're awesome. And then some other ones are portrayed as being great, but they're not. They're all these great things. I'm not really certain what she thinks she's saying here, and I think that's why we're seeing this kind of, a lot of this falling apart with her words and stalling and thinking, because I think she's trying to make it up as she goes along, and it's kind of curving back and forth a lot. I want to talk about a really interesting moment with Parker Posey's body language. So it's at the end of the interview where we hear an off voice saying, okay, thank you, and this is quite common. It's a producer keeping the time who announces, okay, we're good, that's the time, we're bringing in the next interviewer. And you'll notice Kjersti goes, okay, thank you, and gets up pretty quick, gets the heck out of there. And then it cuts to Blake and Parker. And you'll see with Parker, it is slowed down in the video. I think it was to put emphasis on that moment. But you see Parker doing a couple of things. First, those shoulders come up like this as she perks up, and this is a protective position. Usually when those shoulders come up, we're protecting the very vulnerable part, which is the neck over here. So we do something like this. So we see this. We also see this kind of eye roll. So we catch just the end of it, but we see those eyebrows coming down from this eye roll like this as it ends up with what we call looking askance, which is this kind of sideways look when something's uncomfortable or we're judging something. But with that eye roll, it's like this, oh my God, glad that's over type thing. That's what it looks like more or less. It's very quick, but it certainly looks a lot like that. And let me just make a little note about Parker Posey. Naturally, the corners of her mouth go down. And this is even when she's being normal. This is, for some people, that's just the way their face is made, where when they're being normal, the corners of the mouth go down. Another thing to factor in is that Parker Posey is really, really credible when she plays villain roles in movies. So she was in a movie called Blade Trinity, ironically with Blake Lively's husband, Ryan Reynolds, that had a lot of scenes together, and she pulls off that condescending, mean thing really well. And it might have something to do with this natural kind of look where the mouth's turned down like this. So yes, at the end, it looks like it's this, oh God, glad that's over, this acknowledgement of the awkwardness. But I can't tell you 100% with certainty if that's directed at the interviewer, like, oh, she was annoying, glad she's out of here, or about the situation, like, oh God, that interview got uncomfortable, without it being specifically directed at someone. It's hard to know. It's a quick moment, and it's hard for me to look at that and go, here's why that moment is happening, and also take into consideration that she often just looks on her face like she's not overwhelmingly happy. That's the point I was trying to make. So this kind of negativity might also be a little bit part of her baseline. So all this to say, she is contributing quite a bit to this vibe here, but it's hard to gauge exactly to what extent with a lot of accuracy. Blake, on the other hand, as far as this interview goes, is a different story. We could see in her behaviors that she is causing this negativity and that this is her intention, because we're seeing these expressions, these comebacks that are uncalled for coming out of nowhere, and the body language that goes with it is that condescension, that judgment, and that conflict, creating this conflict. So again, that doesn't speak to her as a person outside of this interview. I don't know what she's like, but I have a lot of questions as to what could be going on with someone to cause these kinds of behaviors, especially in the beginning when the interviewer was just laughing it off and trying to move on, and she completely shut her out, and we saw that intent. What was going on? And I think it's odd that there isn't a response yet in any format, because let's say this is just her having a really bad day, or let's just say she had no idea she was behaving this way. Let's say she didn't have a clue, that it was completely intentional. She saw this, it's gone viral, people are talking about it, she saw it. There's a great opportunity for her to come out and say either, look, it's inexcusable, I shouldn't have behaved that way, whatever, whether there's an excuse or not, I was having a bad day, I took the comment wrong, something was going on, but I shouldn't have done that, or justify it, explain what's going on, something, some kind of commentary to let us know that you don't claim this. Because as long as she's not commenting on this, we're going to sit there and go, okay, this might be normal for her. This has happened other times. That's why she's not commenting on it. Because if she justifies this one and then two more come out, that justification is useless. But why isn't this more concerning to her? For her to look at it and go, oh my God, how could I behave this way? I have to make a statement. Kjersti, the interviewer, on the other hand, has shared her side of the story. And I'll leave links in the description to her YouTube videos where she's talking about her version of the story. Because she has a lot of questions. You know, people were saying, it seems quite coincidental that you're releasing this video now, 8 years later. There's also the fact that in 2018, she had an interview with Blake Lively. So she had another interview. So people were saying, well, that's weird. If it was really uncomfortable for you and you really disliked your experience, why would you interview her? And she shares footage where we literally see before they film that interview, we see her discomfort, how it really doesn't seem like she wants to be there, but this is what she does. She's a freelance interviewer. There are certain gigs she has to go do. So that's what she's saying for her side. I would love to get Blake Lively's side on this, to counter that, to let us know what was going on here, because I don't think it's deniable for anyone to watch this and defend these behaviors. Again, I'm not saying it speaks to her as a person, but in the context of this interview, there's some stuff that she should be addressing, because again, not a great look. But let me know in the comments what you think of all this. Could this be one big misunderstanding and there's something going on here that isn't exactly as negative as it seems? And if so, do you think that the right move for her to do would be to come out and talk about it, explain it, and give her version of the story? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you on the next one.